Welcome to the Meet the Team podcast. I'm Brady Jolly, and I'm here with my friend Dylan Veely. Thanks for being here, man. Excited to have you.
I appreciate it, sir. It's a pleasure to be up here finally,
Yep. Heck yeah, man. So we're just going to dive right into, why don't you tell us about personal life, family, what you do for fun, that sort of stuff. I know you got a bunch of kids. Tell us all about it.
Well, everybody knows, the military was a big part of who I was as a, person. I did 11 years, and unfortunately we had to cut it short, which is okay because I'm home full time with the kids. I got 4 kids, 9 and under at home. My daughter Caroline's 9. I got Braxton, he's 7. Carter's 5, and Corey's 3. Everybody's in school now. So it's just, I call it controlled chaos with zero control.
Uncontrolled chaos.
But we managed to get by. But no, I've been part of the Jolly team for I think a year and 6 months now. So it's one of those, literally I got out of the service and then 72 hours later I was part of the Jolly team.
Yeah, man. First, I want to talk about that transition, but first just talk about your time in the Marine Corps. Why did you decide to go that route? And then what was it like? What were you doing day to day? That sort of thing.
Well, because I joined probably a year and a half, 2 years out of high school, and it was just one of those like, hey, I would like to say I was in a good place in life. I wasn't doing anything crazy, but it was like, hey, I want to get out of the town. This was something that was always what I wanted to do, out of high school. And I finally, I was like, hey, let's do this. I wasn't married, didn't have any kids when I joined. So I joined at 20 years old. I actually turned 21 in my schoolhouse when I was going through SOI, School of Infantry. And then my first enlistment, I was at Camp Lejeune from 2013 to 2017. I was with 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines. Me and the wife, we had 1 child then. About 8 months prior to me I'm like, hey, we're going to get out of the service. Hey, guess what? Wife's pregnant. So it's one of those like, hey, do we really want to get out unprepared, with our family? So we ended up deciding like, hey, let's do this again. So I re-enlisted for the first time, and we went up.
That's after 4 years for another 4?
Yep. So I re-enlisted for another 4 years. We went up to Quantico, Virginia, where I was an instructor for lieutenants at the basic school up there. Had a lot of fun, met a lot of outstanding people. My best friend, Keaton Moore, I think we were there for maybe 24, 40 hours before I met this dude, and now we're family now. And
how the training, how similar to the movies is that?
Let's just say the explosions, not the most real thing you'll ever see. Like big ball of fire, that is not a thing. When grenades go off, that is not a thing. It's just, real loud boom, and then, you got shrapnel and stuff shooting everywhere. But the flaming ball of death is not a thing.
What about like the training difficulty and that sort of thing? Tell us about the lessons you learned going through training.
I would just say like, when you're in the moment, like you feel weak and, down on yourself, like, oh, this sucks. Like, why am I doing this? But like after the fact, the satisfaction you get from, the mental fortitude, like, hey, I just did that. And, I spent, a week or 2 weeks in the woods, just with my squad, my platoon, and, just, living it out and living off MREs and whatnot. And it's just one of those, like, it tests you as a man, just that mental toughness. And it varies. Like sometimes, like, I went to, for my job, you had to go to these advanced schools. And my first one was 7 weeks, and the second one was 8, 9 weeks. And I will tell you, if there was a time where I'm like, hey, I'm second guessing my life, it was going to these advanced schools, because it definitely was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And I'm grateful for it now. Back then I'm like, feeling pity for myself, like, oh, what, this hurts or whatnot. But I'm grateful for it. I was grateful.
You probably feel like, you did that. It's almost like now you can do anything. You're probably never going to do anything that
100%. And it was one of those, like, it's not necessarily, you can't feel down for yourself. I will, like, I brought this with me to the Jolly team. I'm always a team first guy. You know, I will go out of my way to help whoever, whenever, however I can. And that's how, you know, that was a big thing in the Corps, was like, hey, you know, you're only strong as your weakest link. You know, the
Yep.
mission and the task, the mission is priority, you know, and we have our missions here,
Yep.
you know, as a team, and, you know, it's helping customers and getting the job done. So
Yep.
it's one of those, like, how, like, you know, not to sound cheesy, like trying to bring that, my military lifestyle over to this, you know, just, you know, being part of the team, you know, it's a big
Yeah,
thing.
100%. So when you were at Quantico and then you eventually decided to come out of the Marine Corps, what happened?
We left Quantico, COVID happened, and it was one of those, like, hey, you know, what are we going to do from here when COVID hit? Because everybody's life stopped during COVID, especially in the military. The restrictions that we had when we were in the service was, you know, horrible. It was bad. And so I ended up re-enlisting again, and I went back to Camp Lejeune to do another deployment with 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. And I was with them for a year and a half before, long story short, during war times, you got a bunch of active units. When peacetime starts to settle in, they start, you know, disbanding these units. So during that time, I hurried up and put orders in to go to SOI, where it all started, you know, years ago when I was a young guy. So I went back to the schoolhouse to be a combat instructor, you know, for, you know, our young men joining the infantry community. So I did that until I got out. So we were 13, 14 week period of instruction that we, you know, we were training these kids right out of boot camp how to, you know, do infantry things.
Wow.
You know, that's where, you know, unfortunately, you know, I found out, you know, I had a pretty good shoulder injury, and that's what, you know, pretty much halted my time in the service. I had surgery, you know, it took me a year to recover, and got to the point where, like, hey, you know, I'm not going to be the same individual I was prior to that. And we ended up getting medically separated, and we moved home back to good old Northern Kentucky, and, you know, joined the team here.
Man, so when you came out, what was the decision-making process like? Like when you're thinking about getting a job and what's that going to be like, getting back into civilian life, and then
Well,
ultimately the trades?
it wasn't, you know, because obviously I was in there long enough. You know, I'm 33 now. When that transition was happening, I was 30, 31 years old. So it was one of those, like, hey, you know, I wasn't lost. Like, I had the right mindset. Like, hey, this is what I need to do. I need to provide for my family. You know, how can we accomplish that task right offhand? And a big thing we did was, once I started going through that separation, I moved my family home about 9 months before I got out. So there was a 9 month period where, you know, my wife and kids were here in Hebron, where we bought a house, and they were living there, you know, full time. And I was, you know, shacking it up down in, you know, Lejeune with my buddies, you know, sleeping in my office, sleeping at my buddies' houses, you know, just wherever, just to, you know, because to help with that transition, you know,
Sure.
you know, that made it easier. It was crappy in the front end, but it, you know, paid off. You know,
Good.
because I didn't want my kids to switch schools halfway through the school year, and, you know, job stability. At least I had a source of income coming in from the military still. So, you know, getting a house back here, that, you know, getting a mortgage, you know, that was able, you know, we were able to do that when I
Yeah.
was still in. Because if I did that when I was in that transition, highly doubt that.
Would have been
You
a
know?
lot more challenging.
Yep.
Yeah, that was probably a great move. So why the trades? Why Jolly?
Well, let's rewind it before my service time. I did HVAC and plumbing for a little bit, before I joined. And, you know, through the years, my father was a carpenter, and that was something always, you know, we were always around it as, you know, me and my brothers as, you know, kids growing up, you know, as simple as being the flashlight guy, or, you know, here, hold this, you know, that's where it all started. And it was one of those things through my time in the service, you know, depending on, 4 years, 8 years, 11 years I did, it was always something I wanted to do when I got out. There ain't nothing wrong with going back to school, but it was one of those like, hey, like, this is what I enjoy. You know, I like working with my hands. You know, I like helping people. So it was one of those. You know, when I was transitioning, we prior employee we used to have here, Tyler Kozlowski. You know, super good buddy of mine. We were stationed together the first time. You know, in that military community, you were always helping each other out, and it was one of those, hey, you know, what's going on back home? He told me about the job here at Jolly, and when I first was coming out, you know, I went and sat down with Schneller and was like, hey, do you offer this program where I could use my GI Bill while I'm working? And they said no, but they would look into it. And then I spoke to Tyler, and, you know, Jolly and the team already had that, you know, everything set. And I didn't know, you know, so I didn't know. So it was one of those like, well, crap. So I put in March of 24, and Molly reached back out to me, and, you know, it's been the best thing since, because, you know, I'm a student of Jolly. You know, I get housing allowance, you know, like I'm going to school, but I'm
Yeah, talk about the program. How's the program work for other veterans that might be listening? How's that program work?
Well, I think it runs for 2 years, and throughout like the first 6 to 8 months, you get 100% of your BAH. So whatever, you know, that allowance is for your zip code, I think that's how it goes. Like, you'll get, you know, X amount of dollars, you know, to help towards housing. And then same thing, once a year you get, you know, a book stipend, you know, so I'll get paid for books, or AKA tools that I want to go out and buy. And it'll run for about 2 years, and like, but through that whole time, it'll go from like 100%, you'll get 80%, you know, all the way down, you know, to XYZ. But, you know, it's every little bit helps.
Dude, it's such an awesome opportunity. You're getting paid to train, and now you're fully launched as a service technician and out in people's homes every day, all on your own. Why don't we go to just talk about that coming into the trade? You know, you had that little bit of experience from back before your military days. But coming in, really being pretty green, and as far as the trades go, not really having a whole lot of trade experience. From that till now, where you're out every day helping customers on your own?
Well, shoot, let's say, like, when I first got hired on, like, I'd like to say, like, how the plumbing team was then versus now is night and day. You know, we got a bunch of great dudes on the team that, you know, I'm not saying we didn't have that then, but just the experience on the team is night and day. And it's one of those, when I felt like, you know, when I launched, was it probably a little premature? Maybe, but at the same time, like, you know, I like to say I'm a pretty smart dude when it comes to, you know, get my hands on things. And it, you know, if I ever got myself into a spot, you know, I felt like I was, you know, not comfortable with, it was always like, hey, make a call, or, you know, somebody can come out and help. And, you know, it was, you know, on the job training. So it's one of those, like, from my, you know, last year to now, it's like night and day when it comes to, you know, the service calls that I run. Like, you know, I feel pretty comfortable with everything that we do as a team. You know, I guess the only other thing, like, I wouldn't say I'm like, oh, is, you know, on our sewer side of things. But even then, like, you know, I've been getting hands-on with that with the guys more, you know, lately. And it's just night and day, you know, and it's just one of those things, as long as you have the right mindset that, hey, I'm going to come, like, this is all how I've always been. I'm going to come into work today, and I'm going to learn something new, or, you know, I'm going to progress on, you know, this, or this. And it's just something like, I was always coming into work like, hey, I'm going to, you know, get my hands on this, you know, to improve. Because it's one of those, like, you know, even with the experienced guys on the team, it's one of those, you're always going to run into something that you've never, like, you haven't seen before, you know, that's plumbing. You know, we go into houses that are from the 1870s, and it's like, what the heck am I looking at, you know? So, you know, you just, you know, figure it out. You know, we have a team, like, if you ever get yourself in a spot, like, you make that call.
I think that really is what separates us, especially now. You talked about our team now. Like, if you've been in the trades long enough, you've ran into times where maybe it's 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're on an island and you don't know what to do and you're stuck. The cool thing about our team now, they pick up the phone, they come out and help. You're one of the guys that does that. Like, you know, we've all been in group chats where it's like, hey, I need help. Anybody out there to help me? And it's crickets, you know. I'm like super proud because that's not our team anymore. It's like, dude, I got your back. I'm on it. let me come help. And, you know, I think you're a core part of that. You said it earlier. It's like that military mindset. We're all here to help each other. And what the cool thing I've seen, you even mentioned it, now it's like plumbing service is helping sewer install when they need it. Sewer install is helping plumbing. HVAC even will help plumbing, or plumbing will help HVAC. It really has become this super cohesive.
Accomplish the mission.
Yeah.
You got to accomplish the mission.
So, man, talking about mission, you know, our mission statement, reimagining how the world experiences home services, and then our values. Talk about what that means to you, and then if there's any values that stick out to you that you like to live every day.
There's two that, you know, I always like strive by is be the name. You know, the big thing, you know, it might sound cheesy in the service, you had your name on your blouse, on your uniform. You know, you don't want to embarrass your name. Here at Jolly, you have your name on your shirt. Like, don't embarrass yourself or the company. You know, so that's a big thing that, like, hey, you know, be the name. You know, I'm here to be the face of the company. And then, you know, the here to serve. It's one of the, you know, I'm like you know, I could say it over and over again. You know, I'm that guy. I'm going to give my shirt off my back, you know, to help you, or, you know, to help our customers, you know, because it's one of those, how I related, like when a customer or somebody's having us out for, you know, a plumbing related, you know, problem, like 9 times out of 10, that's the crappiest time of their life.
Sure.
Like, what the heck is happening? And like, you're there to give them that reassurance, like, hey, you know, I'm going to take care of you, you know, and just being, you know, like I always say, just be a good dude and the job's going to sell itself. Like, you be a humble, you know, individual, you know, be upfront with them. It's going to pay for itself.
Yeah, if you're truly there to help the customer, that you're going to sell jobs.
Yep.
You know, they sense that and they know that. Man, I love what you said, and I think you embody that. You know, it's not just words. We see that every day. You really help people. You help your team. You serve the customer with the best of them, man. So can't tell you how much appreciate that. Being in service now, you know, how many years have you been here?
Year and a half.
Year and a half, and then you've been in a truck for going on a year?
A year and 3 months.
Okay. Awesome. So you did get in a truck quick.
Yeah.
You did get in a truck quick. I forgot it was that
3
quick.
months, yeah.
What stories stick out? Anything crazy, funny, interesting that's happened out there?
Well, when they asked me this yesterday, I'm like, dang, what the heck is like something I can tell? And I could think back to, I think it was my first week as an apprentice on the job. And we were running a drain call over here in Highland Heights. And I'm like, oh, it's just a normal utility sink drain call. Like, it's just backing up, you know. The technician I was running with, like, oh, we're just going to use this tub gun to, you know, clear this stoppage. And next thing you know, like, we popped this old copper drain line. We popped this clean out to run the cables in. And it gets about a foot, maybe 2 feet in, and you hit something. You know, what the heck is this? We go to pull it out, and just the most god-awful smell. It is a smell that you will remember. I could, like, close my eyes and smell it. There was a dead rat that climbed through this person's drain line, and it was decaying in their pipes. And when that thing, like, broke, you know, and got out of that water, oh, my God, it cleared that base. And, like, me trying to be like, oh, I'm a hard ass, you know, I'm like, I can do this. Like, it's all wrapped up on this tub gun, and like, we're trying to tell the homeowner, like, hey, well, we got it, but at the same time, like, their basement just smells like death right now, and here I am, like, you know, with the other technician, like, I'm trying to keep down my lunch, and I'm just like, oh God, like, this isn't happening.
Oh man,
right now.
welcome to the trades.
Yeah,
First weekend.
but and like, fast forward, like, has that happened since? Absolutely not. But it's just ironic. Like, my first week on the job, I'm like, what the hell are we
That's
getting
nuts.
into? What the hell are we getting into? And then, and then, you know, here I am always talking about, like, I'm trying to, like, help the customers, you know, during their time of crisis. And last week we had a bit of a hiccup on the team where, like, somebody was supposed to go out to a customer's house. We ended up we didn't get out there that day, so they're pretty upset. I got out there the following morning to help them out, and like to say, I smooth things over for the company. You know, brought the name out. You know, made him happy. He was an older gentleman. He's probably in his 80s. You know, just, you know, he had something. His kitchen sink was leaking. at the basket strainer. And when I was going to leave, I just reassuring like, hey, we'll do whatever we can to help you. Thank you for having us out. And he reaches out to give me a tip. He gave me a $15 tip. And, how I am, I'm always like, you don't need to do that. And I go to reach up to like pat him on the shoulder, like, hey, you don't need to do this, sir. And he took it as like, oh, he's going to give me a hug. And he like this older guy reaches in to give me a hug. And I'm just like, oh, it's okay, sir. So it's one of those like,
hug it out.
I'm like, hey, like, I'm glad we smoothed this over from what happened yesterday, but I thought that was funny.
That's awesome.
That was funny as heck. I'm like, all right, he's coming in for
We had a
hug.
picture of that, man. He's just hugging it out with old man.
I thought that was freaking funnier than hell.
That's awesome. So, you got your, as a plumber, you're in tight spots, crawl spaces, under sinks, attics. If you get a call come across on your tablet, what's like the worst call for you to get where you're like, man, this is going to suck?
Well, you said it, like anytime you're getting in somebody's crawl space or you're at, mobile home and you're like, ain't nothing wrong with like you're there to help those individuals, but sometimes it's one of those like, what the heck's underneath these homes right now? Because I've gone in where you could look across. It was probably like 6 months ago, and you look underneath this crawl space, and there was a cat that succumbed to its wounds, and it was like just standing upright on this on this drain line, and you're just like, We're going. But usually, like, it's one of those, like, if you're getting yourself in that predicament, like, usually we space it out to where, like, you're going to have, I call it moral support. So somebody else on the plumbing team's going to come out and, you're going to hold hands as a team. Like, hey, we're going to do this together, So
and that's where some of the most fun stories come from, too.
So it's just one of those, like, hey, if you catch yourself in a spot. But it's not necessarily, like, the tight spaces, but, like, I try to reiterate this on our home inspections when we do, we go to our members' houses, like your kitchen sink, like your drain line on your kitchen sink's like one of the bigger burdens on a home, because it's one of those like, hey, I got this garbage disposal or whatever, I could just put whatever down this drain line. And, I've gone into homes where, you're trying to clear out a drain on a branch line and you can't, make hayway with your tub gun or your drain machine, and to find out, it's caked brim to brim with greases, eggshells, coffee, like you name it, whatever they're putting down there. And it's one of those, sewer smell has its own, like, you're like, oh, this is bad. But like you cut into an old grease line that's been cooking in there for a few years. That's the worst. That is, probably one of those where you're like,
maybe other than a dead rat.
And I'm like, yes. I'm like, it make you like, oh, what my life choices up to this point. Like, is this really, but nah, you just, you keep on keeping on.
I'm with you. Grease is the worst. All right. So back to the crawl space. You're in a crawl space. Other than a dead cat, what's the worst thing you want to run into in a crawl space?
Probably a live, like a raccoon, just beady eyes staring at you like, hey, like, you're in my casa. What are you doing down here right now?
Totally agree.
But no, I'm fortunately, I'm not too worried about, like snakes or anything like that. I'm not that guy. So it's just one of those, as long as like, you're not having a bunch of like fecal matter, stuff like that laying all over. Usually I'm the first one. Like, you can ask the guys on the team anytime we get called out. I'm the one putting the suit. I'm like, I'm diving.
You're in.
I'm diving in. I'll take it for the team. All
right. So the other side of the question is, what are some of the things that come across your tablet that you love to see, where you're just licking your chops? Some of your favorite jobs to do in the trade.
Some of my favorite jobs. It sounds. One, I can't say my favorite, but like this past year, we had that real hard freeze come through. We had a lot, like there weren't enough of us, like even us as a Jolly team, but plumbers in the tri-state area, there weren't enough of us for what happened this past winter with, that freeze that came through. But, the quick, water repair line, just repairing water line, like in and out, like, and then going back to during that time, I had, an older couple had their line pop, and they had, I get the call like, hey, it's spraying everywhere in our basement. And, this is big, like, here to serve and educating people, on, the stuff within their home. Because a lot of people are like, hey, where's your main shutoff to your house? They have no idea.
No clue.
So it's one of those, like, I call the husband of this household. I'm like, hey, you're on your way home. As soon as you get home, find your main shutoff, just kill the water. And he's like, I don't know where that is. So it's one of those, like, I'm not trying to be mean about it, but as soon as I arrive, obviously I go straight to the source. I turn the water off. But I'm like, hey, both of you, come with me. Like, if doomsday ever happens again, you need to know where this is.
Yeah,
100%. And it's one of those, like, like, hey, like, this is the kill switch right here. If you ever need to shut the water off, like, you need to know where this is.
Yep.
But small stuff like that. And then, obviously I had this happen to me when I was, I first launched. I always thought putting garbage disposals in were like a pain, but it's just one of anything we do in the trades, it's just sets and reps, like, practice your craft. Yep. And it's just one of those, after a while, it's one of, I got like clockwork now, but I made the rookie mistake that
Didn't punch the plug out?
Didn't punch the plug out, and, like, fast forward, like, I'm, like, going back out there, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. But, and then I'm, like, talking to the guys on the team, oh, it happens at least one time. And I'm like, well, you could have told me.
You could have mentioned it.
You could have told me this. I could have been that one guy,
It does seem like it happens to everybody. It usually happens once, and you don't never do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
So, disposals or anything, like, putting faucets in, it's one of those, like, at first, like, it was one of those, like, oh, crap, like, what am I getting into? But now, like I said, sets and reps, now it's just like clockwork,
Yep. Heck yeah, man. Well, some of the things you mentioned, like the freeze ups, those are just cool because you're helping people, like you said, at the worst possible.
Yep.
It's 10 degrees outside and they have water in their house and it's freezing cold. That's the last thing you want. When we can come out and get them taken care of, that's valuable. That feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep. That's this big thing. I always like, the satisfaction of the job is like, I get to take care of somebody, during their worst possible time.
Yep. So, man, what would you say is your favorite part about working at Jolly?
My favorite part about working at Jolly, I would just say, like, like I always talk about the team, I can always come in knowing, even like the chaos of the day, like, hey, what the heck's the board going to look like or whatnot. But everybody on the team just makes it so, I can enjoy, like, waking up every day. Like, hey, could be at the highest high, lowest low, but, like, the character, the individuals, that we have that work here at Jolly, like, make it as a whole, and that was a big thing, like, for me, getting out of the service. Like, I had such a tight, like, family in the service that, because, your blood family is so far away from you, you build your own little community.
Yeah.
And, like, I like to say, like, people come and go in the trades, but it's one of those, like, us as a core, there are a lot of good individuals that work here, and, I got a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, it's cool right now. It just feels like there's a lot of, like, lifelong friendships being built out there. Like, look around, people are hanging out on the weekend, spending time with each other. There's family. I love that. That's what creates that bond where people are going to really love what they do. They love the company, but if you love the people you're working with, that's sticky. People want to stay for that and want to be a part of it. And I love that those things are going on beyond the scenes. It's not something that, like, the company's sitting here like, we can't control that, but it's just really cool to see, right?
Yeah.
So,
like, and it's like you always have your gripes and complaints. That's freaking life, Get up, take that next step forward, keep on, and it's one of those, like, you're gonna make it, enjoyable, or you're gonna make it miserable, So it's just one of those, like, we have a bunch of good people here that make it, like, hey, I really enjoy being here. You know?
Well, man, I can't thank you enough for, what you've done for us. You come on every single day. I couldn't agree more. You are the be the name guy, Two things come to mind for me. Be the name and winners work. You're going to grind. You're reliable. You're here every day. The team can count on you. you know, you're one of the steady guys. It's like we know we can count on Dylan, and it doesn't hurt to just have some Marine badasses walking around as well. So I love that, man.
Be
And,
humble.
the last thing I wanted to ask you, if you had to talk to a Marine about coming out, obviously there's a million career options. What would you tell them about the trades that you like about it, and what makes a transition easy from being in service to the trades?
The transition, it's just one of those, like, I guess how I've always treated it. Like, you always got, like, you got to make your mark. Like, you got to, you know, you might have been at your highest high in the service. Like, you were, you know, the alpha. Like, you're the guy in charge. When getting out, like, you got to humble yourself. Like, hey, I got to reset my mindset. Like, hey, I'm not the know-it-all anymore. You know, you got to come in, you know, the trades as, like, you know, open that mind like a sponge again. Like, you got to take it all in. And it's just one of those, like, depending on, I guess you could just say, depending on what job you had in the service, like, it's one of those, like, sometimes it might be easier to transition than others. And it's like, you're not a 9-to-5 office guy. Like, you know, you're back in the thick of it. You know, you're grinding out in the field like you were, you know, like I was before. So it's just one of those, trying to not talk in circles here. Just finding, like, I can't say, like, finding, I don't know how it would be if I went to, like, a bigger plumbing company, or if I would have started with a bigger plumbing company. I don't know how that would have been. You know, I came to, I'm not saying we're small.
Sure, local.
But, you know, we're a local family-owned, you know, company, so it made it easier that, like, you as the owner know who the hell I am.
Yeah.
You know, and some places you go, like, you know, you're in the service, you're not just a number anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I'm Dylan, and, like, you know, we're on first name basis.
Yep.
So it's just one of those that, like, you know, you can connect a lot better, you know.
Yeah, I think that is, just as I'm hearing you think about that, like that would be really cool to tell people that are thinking about it. It's like there's a big difference in going and working for one of these conglomerates. It's a $1 billion company that owns 150 branches.
Well, then and it goes back to, like, you know, me being a family guy. You know, necessarily, I'm not giving myself excuses, but it's not like I could have gone back to a 4-year degree and got a 4-year degree while, you know, I'm trying to provide for my family. You know, it would have been hard.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying it couldn't have been done, but at the same time, like, always, like, I always knew, like, hey, I'm not, like, school's not necessarily for me. You know, this, you know, I already had my mindset, like, hey, you know, the trades was always calling my name, and, you know, we're the backbone, you know, keeping America going, you know.
Yeah, and man, it's honestly, when a guy like you walks in the door and says, hey, I want to be in the trades, that's a dream scenario for a company like ours, right? Somebody who has the discipline to have been enlisted for 11 years, grown up now, wants a career, has a family. It's serious. It's not just like you're not 19 getting your first job and just, you know, it's like, hey, I want to be here to become a plumber and get in a truck, do my own thing, make a living, build a career. Like, that is music to our ears when a guy like you walks through the door.
And the big funny, I know, I'm not to get, like, sidetracked, they're always, like, in the service, you can never really have, like, a sick day.
Yeah.
You know, and, like, I come here and, like, I see, like, people calling off, or, like, oh, my throat's scratchy, I can't come in today. And it's just one of those, like, you know, I've come in on some of my worst days, and it's like, you know, I laugh about it, you know, I'm like, you know, I could probably take a day.
Yeah.
You know? And I always go back to, like, you know, my mindset before. It's like, oh, you got to keep on going, you know.
I love it, man. I mean, seriously, I just love your mindset. I know you got a really bright future here, and we're just getting started. So thanks for being on here. It was great. It was a lot of fun. Good catching up with you,
It was a pleasure.
brother.
You know, wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
All good.